We have spent a great deal of energy to have interfaith and intrafaith, and we held many conferences in Amman, in Morocco, in different parts of the world, in Amman. But we find that most of these conferences, everybody preaches to the converted, and there is lots of lovely speeches, but at the end of it, when there is a conflict, everybody retreats to their corner and the whole society is polarized. So we have decided to do it a different way. And that way is to engage in practical programs where you have projects where you actually speak for the other. You don't want to take, you want to give. And if the other party does the same, then you could have a very healthy relationship. And I'd like to share some of the experiences with you. For example, we find that a lot of the problems that people talk about within the Muslim world is not so much to do with religion or faith or fiqh per se, is to do with the underdevelopment of many Muslim societies. It's essentially the problems of the underdeveloped world. So we thought the best way to tackle some of these issues is to raise standards in mosques. So despite many problems, we have about 600 mosques joined in a project called MINAB, Mosques and Imams National Advisory Board, which had 5 goals. One is to raise the standards of management of mosques, to increase the involvement of the youth, to increase the involvement of women, and to give a big role for training imams for interfaith work, and use the mosque as a community hub. And we find through this interaction, a lot of the problems between Sunni and Shia is disappearing, because we are talking about problems, how do we resolve it? And we learn from each other's good practice. And we share food. And this idea really developed into something more grand. For example, this year about 200 mosques opened their doors for a big iftar. So the local neighborhood can come and share iftar and food. Sometimes they know nothing about Islam. They've just heard it about the media, and they're usually quite negative perceptions. And we found this kind of work is extremely important. We also engage with other faiths. So we have football tournament between Jewish and Muslim children, and we usually divide the teams half-half, so it's no winner or no loser. We have the use of art and drawing. So basically, contribution of the challenges the Muslims face and their integration into public life in a very quiet, in a very sort of sustained manner, without having to go through all the sort of big speeches and all this. And this has been, I think, quite an important experiment. And in my view, that the development of the Muslim world, much of it will come from migrant communities living in the West, because they have to deal with the realities on the ground. This is perhaps many Muslims have the first time experience in living in pluralist societies. Let me just give you one example. In much of the Muslim world, Sunnis and Shias are sort of at each other's throat. But in London, we have our school is opposite a Sunni school, Islamia, owned by Cat Stevens. Some of you may know him. He's a famous singer. Now, instead of us dividing the two schools into Sunni and Shia, we've actually decided not to do that. So we keep a good number of Sunnis and they keep a good number of Shias. So this year, when we had a bit of parking about Ashura, they were the ones who would give us their parking space. So these kind of interactive working relationships help to build better relations. And I'm not saying all the problems are over, but what I'm saying, this is a model which can be used to sort of duplicate in other parts of the world. The second point I want to mention, we are now involved in a lot of projects in Iraq. Father Amir is here and he's part of it. And these projects are to do with getting Christian and Muslim leaders meet each other in their homes, coming to holy cities and reciprocating, visiting churches. And there is a very important secular element involved in this. We have involved the secular people who are not interested in religion, but they just want more rights for everyone. Part of this project is also to impress upon the authorities, it's not an easy task, that religious education has to be about teaching, not about preaching, which is unfortunately the concept in much of the Middle East. When you teach religion, you are preaching to the child, whereas it should be about teaching the child, and part of that teaching is to teach them about other faiths. We ourselves only last week, for the first time, managed to get the British curriculum, which teaches RE, to actually recognize Shia Islam. To recognize Shia Islam, I can't talk when somebody's talking. Okay. To recognize Shia Islam in the curriculum. Quite often, many people don't realize that Islam itself is sometimes represented by some of its extremist forms, and the different schools of Islam are many of the public are not aware of it. So this is quite an achievement in that the document is out now for consultation, and after the consultation, hopefully other faiths can learn a little bit about other faiths. Now, there are other issues to do with women, for example. Many Muslim women have problems from within their own communities and from without. And we try to sort of address these. We had quite a bit of problem from some of the more hardline groups who do not even allow women into the mosques. And this is coming from an Arabic background. For me, this is very strange, because women in the Arab world go to mosques. But it is a sort of an Asian, sub-Indian continent culture, which is somehow mixed with Islam. So some groups in India and Pakistan think for women to go to mosque is haram. So we are breaking some of these. If you like, this is an ijtihad based on the realities on the ground. And some of this is having real effect on the communities back home. Back home, I cannot say that some of the work we are doing in speaking out about Christian minorities, about the Yazidis, about the Sabians, and minority nobody speaks about, is something we have developed as a result of our living in the West. But what I want to say, within Islam, there is that concept of ijtihad which can adapt and adopt to the realities on the ground. And we have to be careful not to close that door. And I do hope that, I estimate it would take a generation or two before things would really change. But we already have. I have lived in the West for the last 40 years. From the day I was told you can't really live here, you can't become a national, to the day all the scholars say you can even be an MP, you can do this, you can do that. So opinions change, ideas change. Islam is quite adaptable, and I hope this conference and this debate will help improve that. Thank you very much.